order to mold it, I need to remove it from the rotating stand that it's on. I don't need to, but it will make it a lot easier for me because of the way I'm molding it. Since I'm not worried about the bottom of this piece, this is going to be a very simple one-piece mold. What I have here is a clay cutter, just a piece of wire. I'm holding it level with the turntable top that the brain is on, and I'm sliding through. Now there's nothing connecting. That vacuum suction is still there, but at least I know the clay is cut and it's not fused down onto it. So I can very gingerly move that out of the way, lift my brain up right there. Let me see how I did. A little bit of a mar down there, but easy enough. Touch that up again with sculpting tools and get it flipped around. Let's give it a few lines. Knock them down. Okay. Again, super simple. This is for a haunted house, so it's not like it's for an anatomy class. I want to find a container that is big enough to cover this brain completely. I don't intend on taking the container off. I do need to mark how tall the mold needs to be on it. It could be a cardboard box. In this case, I'm using a plastic bucket. Could be anything. I just want to mark how high my mold needs to be. Be about that high all the way around. Have a stout pair of scissors. You don't have to use scissors. You could use a saw if you wanted to. Probably safer to use a saw. I'm just cutting the bottom out of this bucket so that I can make the bucket itself the walls of my mold. Right now, that fits down right over top, and I can pour plaster into here, which will fill up. The clay creates a void. When the plaster's dry, I will flip this over, pull out the clay, and put in latex or silicone or whatever I want to make my cast of. And I think that's at a pretty good height, and I have just enough clearance all the way around for this. And it should make a pretty nice clean mold, because I'll just leave this on the sides. Pick that up right now. I want to look at my sculpture just to make sure this is what I want it to look like. Because once plaster's on, you can't fix it. Here you can see the brain inside of the bottomless bucket. And I'm going to pour plaster in here. It'll go up in around the brain, fill up the sides, and I have to create a seal around the bottom edge of the bucket so that the plaster doesn't leak out, because the plaster is going to be fairly runny. In order to seal the bucket edge, I'm going to use just silicone caulking. This is just shooting a bead of caulk all the way around the rim of the bucket. Check my alignment there, make sure that's good. And I use my finger to make sure that that seals, because I don't want any plaster to leak out. I'm going to wait for that to dry, so that way it's got a good seal on it. And I'll come back. To keep the clay from drying out, I will put a few spritzes of water inside, put a lid on it. I have my brain, my caulking has dried. I put some water in a bucket. I'm about to mix up the plaster in order to make the mold. I have about this much water in here, which is going to make a little more than double that much plaster, which ought to be more than enough to finish this mold. I have the water a little colder than room temperature. The hotter the water, the faster the plaster kicks, meaning the faster it hardens. And I want to make sure I mix up a fairly thin batch so that it can really seep into everywhere it needs to go because of the intricacy of the brain that I am sculpting here. Here is my tub of plaster that I'm going to mix, and I like to keep them close. That way I'm not getting powder everywhere or water everywhere. When you're mixing plaster, always add powder to water, not water to powder. And it's going to take a bit. When it's perfect, what happens is the top of your water looks kind of like the surface of the moon. It's all dry and cracked. And I'll show you that when I get to that stage. I think the volume is something like 5:1 or 6:1 powder to water. So it takes quite a while to get to that stage. And I'll probably have this bucket pretty close to its capacity before I get there. And I am just adding in the plaster. I'm not doing anything fancy. I'm not doing any mixing right now. I'm really just adding it in. I'm trying not to make a big mountain in the center. So it's kind of evening it out. Because I'm looking for a certain thing to happen. And you'll kind of see it when it does. It's that dry earth look that I was telling you about, that surface of the moon. And I'm not there yet, but it's close. There's no point in putting my hand in there until I'm at that point. Right now, I spread around a little bit, but you can tell right there I'm almost level with the water. You can kind of see right in here what I want to happen is happening. See those cracks? Looks like the surface of the moon. I'll put a little more in, because this over here is still pretty wet. And that right there is just about what I want for this first batch. Spread this out, it gets absorbed, and it's cracked. Looks like a dry riverbed. That's just floating on top. Now I start mixing it up. And let's get my hand in there. And I like to just put my hand in and squeeze, and that gets out all of your lumps. It's called Ultra Cal 30 is the kind of plaster that I'm using. And that basically means that I have about 30 minutes to work with it before it gets really hard. If I add more powder than this, then it starts kicking faster. If I add more water, it kicks a little slower. But